Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Career Hive. It's what a week it is, right? Really exciting. Apologies. Normally we try and get this done kind of every week, and there's different things happening. But it's National Careers Week. Loads of stuff happening here at MyPam. We're in the middle of our kind of pre-seed funding round, so we engage with investors. We've got a lot of interest, but also at the same time we're starting to build a bit more traction with organizations who are really interested in hearing what we're doing. And then you just add on the fact that we've got a really exciting project that we're hopefully going to do with Innovate UK. So we're really kind of excited about that. We can't say much about that until we have gone through the next stage. But yeah, so it's been full on, and everything that we're doing is driven to that whole, how do we help organizations, basically, attract early career talent into the roles that they have. How do we help early career talent have access to those particular opportunities, and how are we going to make a much more fair and more cost-effective process, and all that type of stuff. So really exciting stuff, as I said. So hey, here we go, podcast 2. So it is halfway through National Careers Week, and this week kind of runs from the 7th to 12th, and I was thinking about this particular week because, this is something that, if I'm correct, was started by Nick Newman, and at the time when Nick kind of started off the early stages of this journey for the National Careers and the week and how it came into fruition, I was at the process of setting up my first startup, careers ed tech company called Into Ambition. So I think it's absolutely amazing when I look back at this project. I think it must have been 2010, 2011, and kind of look at the kind of the growth that started with, a couple of, from a conversation with students to help them make more effective choices, and kind of, working with a handful of schools, to now having this thing that is now kind of like really at the core of the kind of the curriculum when it comes to all things related to careers, the amount of organizations which are engaged. I think is really, really exciting to see. I'm really excited about that. So, National Careers Week, look, it's an exciting and wonderful opportunity to really kind of celebrate all the career highs. So some of the things that have been happening in that space, to talk about, get minds focused on what career journey looks like, what a career pathway looks like, for companies to promote what they're doing in those organizations, for schools to really engage with that early career talent. So, to engage with their students around career options and career choices, and really let's create this kind of vibrant conversation around, the fantastic kind of journey that is basically, a career, and what does that mean. And one of the things I looked at, and I thought, let me just kind of quickly, and we'll talk about this, I guess, a bit later on, but we're going to cover things like, the career journey. We're going to look at some of the fastest growing sectors and where that's been and where that's gone over the last probably, 12 months, 2 years, because I think there's a post and pre-pandemic kind of playing that's been happening. So we'll kind of talk about that. We'll look into some of the industries we're looking into, and I'm really excited that I'll give you some information on what we're going to do on episode 4. So fingers crossed. There'll be some exciting stuff, because we're trying to ramp up what we're doing with this particular podcast, and really, the aim is to get more organizations involved, to talk to early careers talent themselves, and then maybe hopefully cover some of the questions that you may have around early careers. So anyway, here we go. So as I said, Early Careers Week, National Week this week. How can I help young people? It's really about showcasing the wonderful world of careers and what that looks like. So let's have a look at 2022, right? If we look at what's been growing, and this is fascinating. So I kind of did a little bit of a search between careers post COVID and everything else. So that's what we look at now, which is where we are 22 going forward. But I also had a little look at what was it like in sort of 2019 in that pre-COVID stage, and let's see whether there's still roles that are still fundamentally the same in terms of demand, in terms of look, and what organization looking for, and what's new. So here we go. So if we look at it now, some of the fastest growing careers is, as you can imagine, vaccine specialist, diversity and inclusion managers, customer marketing manager, machine learning engineers, process development scientists, and business development. That's back in the mix. So, for me, straight away, there's a key role that vaccine specialist role that wasn't really in play. And what I'll say to anybody looking at this, I was talking to someone saying, look, this is a huge opportunity when you look at the government's objective. And I know this is going to be really basic breakdown, but this is how I kind of like to approach careers, because it's from that little shoot that you can create so many different things. But you look at someone becoming a vaccine specialist. What does that role entail? And then what can that career look like going forward? Because there's that interest in terms of nursing, in terms of health and social care, and we know the massive skill gap that comes from that. And all of a sudden, being involved in that opens your eyes up to, because there's an element of training that takes in place. There's an element of job satisfaction that can come from that, and you'd be surprised how many things would work out into becoming a potential career. I know someone who's kind of heading up the plasma department for NHSBT, and today she was telling me that they were potentially having to look at some of their center staffing levels, because they don't have enough of these specialist trained nurses, because it's not just about donating blood. When you're donating plasma, it's a special kind of skill set. And I was like, oh my gosh, next week we've got to do something on healthcare, right? I need to talk about this, because these are the kind of things that are really exciting. And talking about another career that's really exciting, I know I'm kind of jumping around and my team will go mad at this, but let me give an example of a career that I found really interesting. So we had an opportunity to pitch to a group of angel investors. And from that group of angel investors, one of them mentioned that they'd made their money and success on being a fat trader, so fat trading. And I was like, wow, how many young people actually understand that when you go on the stock market, or if you worked in trade, the trading markets, floors, and all that type of stuff, we're not just trading shares in FTSE Fortune 500 companies, but literally we're trading everything you can imagine, including fat. Wow. So anyway, those we might do something around careers that you didn't think were careers that you could be successful in. I don't know. My team will come up with something really exciting. That's why they're creative as they are. So going back to where we were, so we talked about those roles in 2020. Then we looked at kind of where we are then, and what was happening in 2019. And you looked at kind of key areas being every other role that's mentioned there was pretty much on the bar the vaccine scientist, with a lot of drive on data science and analytics, etc. So those are kind of like, you can see that those core roles are still needed now. So there hasn't been much of a shift, but what's happened is created, more roles to come into play. So while we're talking about that, isn't it fascinating to think that if you had a pathway in 2019, how that pathway has potentially changed now that we've kind of had this kind of pandemic coming to play, and what that sort of meant, and how organizations are looking at it. So I thought I'll talk about the changes that can happen, the unpredictability of industry, and everything that's happening in the world today. So one thing to take into consideration when you look at your career journey is it's not a straight line. So I think there's a very small percentage of individuals who have a very, very clear, defined idea and route map of this is what my career is going to look like. A lot of people, I would say majority, will go into a career and they realize, actually, I start here and I end up in this particular place. And I think the last 2 years are probably demonstrating that more and more. Because imagine, you never once in a while, and I know someone who's actually doing this, where they've got trained on how to administer vaccination. So and their job is in data science, but they've kind of got involved in this, and they've done that as part of their wanting to feel like they're giving back and being part of the fight against corona and getting everything back to normal. But that's what I'm trying to say. Not necessarily a career, but it just shows those variations that can happen. So where we are when we chose our decisions at 16 is not where we are today. So we go back to that piece there. Life changes and things can be determined by a lot of things. The industry you're in. So imagine if you're in the coal mining sector, that's completely different right now. If you're in that green energy sector, where your career goes now is kind of unbelievably massive in terms of projection. When we talk about engineering being a big gap. So it's really exciting there. Things like the pandemic coming into play, your own kind of personal circumstances, and that could be the fact that you decide that, you're starting a family, or you're moving to a different part of the world. There's so many different things that come into consideration when you take that into care. And I think also in our career journey, the financial implications come into play. So I made a lot of different decisions in my early part of my career that I wouldn't necessarily make now, based on the fact that, I've got a 15-year-old, I've got responsibilities, and all that type of stuff. So those kind of things can change what you want to do. So it's important to kind of take those into consideration into your kind of career journey. And when you think about the career journey, remember that there's a short, medium, and long-term objective around it. So I always say to everybody, and I even talk to my son and his friends about this, that sometimes it's not necessarily about looking at what's my long-term goal, because what my long-term career will be determined by some of the factors we talked about. So I talk about, my real passion of interest is absolutely in scaling startups and starting startups and all that type of stuff. But I have underneath a burning desire to become an angel investor myself, potentially building a VC company that specializes in, parts of kind of the startup world around, the future of work, backing female and black founded organizations. So what I'm trying to say is that's my long-term goal. But in order for me to achieve that, there's a number of things that I've got to do in the short and medium term. Of one of those is, how do we scale MyPam? How do we continue to drive my career going forward, etc. So everybody will have that, and it's okay to kind of set your long-term goals there. Then you kind of map it back and say my medium and short-term goals, because again, it's all about what is the end process going to look like. My son's got friends of his who are boys are all in academies, and we're talking about the fact that your short-term goal is that you want to play professional football and you want to become a professional footballer. That's the short-term goal. The medium goal is, okay, what happens if that doesn't happen? Where do I go next? And what's my long-term goal, that even if I am successful in that career, what does that look like next? So we're kind of covering all those things, because as I said, there's so many factors, right? There's an environmental factor. I think at the moment, the where you're located as a location has a big place, but also the environment that's happening around. And sometimes I was talking to someone about this, and I said, if you're going to look at your career, there's nothing wrong with you doing like a SWOT analysis. So, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the industry that I'm in and the job that I'm doing and the career I'm in? What are the threats to that? So when you consider that, there's so many industries that evolved and changed, and what are the opportunities? And then you kind of look at, how do I kind of make those opportunities map into my long-term goal, my short-term, medium goal, whatever that is you want to do. You can do a person of the environment. So look at, what's the economic situation right now? Where's the political element of what we're doing? How does that look from a societal perspective? And you're trying to kind of draw those impacts together, because in reality, when you think of it, if you went right now and said, the government has an agenda that they probably didn't have before COVID, and now post-COVID, it's like, how do we build back better? How do we kind of build a greener economy? And even with what's happening in Ukraine, you can see that drive to say, well, how do we become self-sufficient? How do we move and push the green fuel agenda so we're less reliant on these kind of fossil fuels and some idea? So if I was sat there looking at a career, I'm thinking, being in that green energy, sustainability piece, well, that's truly an exciting space to be in, because of those opportunities that comes into play. And maybe if I'm in that sector that's still heavily reliant on the oil and gas, or maybe oil and more fossil fuel per se, then I'll be looking at it and thinking, well, is there an element here that I need to kind of look at what I do next? So there's a lot of things there around how that is. I think also what's changed around career journeys is, when you go back to, say, my parents, my grandparents, most likely, you look at this younger generation, probably less so their this kind of core parent group, but the kind of the generation slightly before that, this was a case of, once you start a job, then let's stay where you are. Let's be stable in where we are and what we're doing. Let's make sure that we're making a wage and we're making money. And as long as money is coming in, then it's okay. Yet the generation is completely different, right? There's a generation that's kind of saying, for me, my career isn't just about a job, right? It's about aligning who I am, what I want, my beliefs, my values with that particular career in that particular industry. So I think that's changed a lot. But fascinating is that we're still having those discussions. So we're in the process of working with the organization just to help them get a couple of apprentices on board. And they're not a big organization in comparison to some of the leading management consulting companies. However, in some of the conversations with people within those particular individuals and kind of engaging with them in a network, the first thing is, it'd be really good to work for those bigger brands, because they're more established, they're kind of well known, and then you can go back. And then when you talk to those apprentices to bees kind of immediate peer group and their friends, it's like, oh man, do you really want to work for that big company? Because then you're kind of going to get lost. And you know what? This is, are they more profit driven than what we want to do, value? And it's interesting to see that, there is a slight differentiation between generations. So that's when I talk about, the importance of having an idea of what you want to do from a career part. The career journey is never a straight line. It's never linear. It's always up and round and everything else like that. So yeah, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things changing on that basis. But the key thing is kind of looking at what does my career journey look like? How do I go about making sure that kind of works out going forward? So that kind of leads us on to something else, right? So we know the environment is changing. We know that careers are not straight line. But let's look at some of the really exciting industries coming into play. So manufacturing and engineering, wow, and I go back to the reason behind that. So if you look at the green agenda being driven by the government, not just in the UK, but potentially in the G7 nations, if you want to call them that drive to sort of say, sustainable energy, right? Electrification and how we get our power, how we use our energy sources, all that type of stuff. You start to understand why engineering and manufacturing is probably one of the fastest growing industries, but also has the biggest amount of opportunity for early career talent because of that nature that they need to bring that skill set into play. It's linked into our STEM subjects. It's linked into that kind of historical how can I put it, kind of neglect, if that's the right word, of what's happened previous to that. Then you got data science and analytics and that AI world. Data is the new oil, I'm hearing, and someone told me that a few weeks ago. And you look at everything that we're doing as a role in organizations and how we use data to kind of help us make better informed decisions, how data decisions define how we apply for loans and all that type of stuff. So to me, you can understand why that particular role is really kind of increasing it in validity and needing to kind of have more people come into it as it goes forward. Mental health services, this is an industry that I know a lot of people involved in this industry, and yes, the challenge of getting really qualified staff is so hard, and the really drive right now is how do we engage the next talent, because also there's a stigma behind this as well, right? We just about getting to the point, but it's okay to talk about how I feel. But also there's our view that am I only dealing with this part of mental health, or what about there's so many other elements to it, and it's trying to bring those alive so everyone can kind of understand, well, this is why this career is probably one of the ones in demand. And the pandemic doesn't help, but there's also loads of stuff that kind of contribute to that as well. Tourism and hospitality, fascinating, because obviously the impact of COVID, and you'd have thought with us not being able to go out as much that this industry would be on its knees, but actually due to the fact that workforce was very much in transit, if that makes sense. So it's not, people kind of see it as I come in, it's a short-term career, or if I come in and I might do this for 2 or 3 years post university, but then I look to get my first proper job. So again, they're feeling that impact because we are going out more and the world is kind of coming back into play now. Digital marketing, internet marketing was one of the things we found. And again, I go back to the fact that, it is how we predominantly buy stuff that we buy nowadays. It's predominantly what we do as organizations. So that also makes sense. And you can literally see the trends, right, between consumer behavior, the behavior of the world population around the kind of roles that start to come into play as industries start to evolve and develop. And again, I go back to that short, medium, long-term plan, that this is not a straight line, it's not linear, it is very much around ups and downs of going around, etc., etc. So there's some really exciting stuff. Other sectors that we also looked at as well, they've come into real big play on the back of vaccines, biomedic, biotech is coming massively there. Of course, healthcare is still kind of a big piece around what we're doing there. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and when you look at the world of careers and how exciting this whole space is huge. What I will say to everybody, just kind of give you an idea of the key things to do. So be flexible, right? Don't be afraid to be open-minded to the kind of opportunities and path that you want to go into. I would suggest that, you do that kind of SWOT analysis, that kind of risk analysis of, what's the potential of this market, right? And if we're buying a house, or if you're buying a big purchase, you do your research, right? And there's nothing wrong with you doing the same thing from your career perspective. So, I'm going into this sector. I'm really, really interested. And it's okay if you forecast that actually in 5 years' time, this sector is going to look this way, because then that means that I have to reskill myself. And my job is to learn everything I can as it is right now, but also equip myself with the skills to go forward. And that's another thing about the career journey. I say to a lot of people that I talk to, and it's kind of something that I've adapted in my own life, right? There's probably a couple of constants that are always in life, right? We all have to pay taxes, and we all unfortunately have to depart this world at some point. And the third thing is always learning, right? We're always learning how to do things differently, how to be better. And you should apply that to your own kind of career journey. And, it's always learning, right? Always picking up new skills, new knowledge. You don't necessarily have to be an expert, but it's having a really good understanding about where is my particular industry going, where's my particular career path going. And if I didn't want to do this anymore, what else is it that I'm interested in that I could follow? There's always that debate between, is your career your passion or your interest? And I'm split between it, right? Because I think sometimes, there's people that I know who are amazing actors, actresses, singers, songwriters, whereby it's their passion, right? But they don't make huge amount of money on this unless they obviously are successful in getting an album released, or a painting or one of their pictures being used. But it's something they love. So what they managed to do is balance it into that hobby factor. So what they're doing is they've got what they do as a job, and then they've got this as a hobby. But also what I'm seeing is that people are kind of slowly linking my hobby and my love with what I do as a job. So you'll have someone who's sort of saying, look, singing is my passion. So what they're doing is they're kind of involved in the music industry in some form or the other, or they're involved in some form of in the hospitality and tourism market, etc. Because for them, there's a kind of that link. It gives them that flexibility to do what they do and love doing, but at the same time gives them a much more kind of stable income, if you want to call it that. But at the same time, they're not so disconnected from what they enjoy doing, right? If you look at, I was talking to my someone I know who, sort of said, look, really passionate photographer, who said, the internet has changed what I could do. So before, I would have to have kind of, I can now do what I love doing at the weekends, get involved with many projects I want. I've got the internet where my accounts, and I can platforms, and I can upload my work, and I can do all this type of stuff, and I can still go on Monday morning and do something that I really, really enjoy at the same time. But I'm kind of combining both of those. So that's why I go back to that flexibility, the ability to kind of read and understand where my sector is going, what does that entail, and how do I kind of keep myself in line with the learning and developments that need to happen along those kind of spaces. As I said to you, it's not a straight line, so expect the unexpected, and that's okay. But if you've done everything else before that, then those things don't really shake you to the core, because you kind of have this sort of plan around what's happening. So yeah, I think that's the exciting part of careers. I said, enjoy National Careers Week. There's so much stuff out there, and if you go into National Careers website, I think there's a virtual career fair going on currently. So there's loads of, I think there's something like 60 or 70 exhibitioners. There's there's workshops and different things happening, all virtually happening over 3 floors. So that whole team have done something really, really amazing, and I'm hoping that this will now be the beginning of something where it was always challenging to get everybody physically in that space. We'll now be able to have this wonderful hybrid event which can be accessed across the UK, even across the world. And how exciting would that be? This is the power of where we are right now, and how we're going to help inform early careers talent, the exciting opportunities that are out there, but also to take businesses and bring them right into the epicenter so they can attract this talent earlier and basically help this talent kind of develop its career journey, within that organization or within that particular sector, going wider. So thank you very, very much for listening to this. As I said, we've got our YouTube channel, which I think the team will probably put a little link at the bottom of this for where that is. You can follow us on our LinkedIn pages. We've got our Twitter page as well. And we are developing other socials at the moment. But listen, please have a look at that. And if you've got any questions for us, please just fire them at us, and we're more than happy to answer that. So keep in touch with us. Like what you like. The things, comment on them. We take that comment. You got any questions, please ask them, and we'll try and cover them next time. So the next plan for the next episode, we're kind of working on that. I'm hoping to kind of bring together the two weeks around National Careers Week, National Apprenticeship Week. So we're in talks to hopefully bring on an apprentice who we're involved with and who's kind of taking that decision, A-level student, to go down the apprenticeship route, and just kind of talk through her journey and what she's done. We're going to talk hopefully to a co-founder of a really exciting organization where they're looking to bring in potentially their first apprentice on board, and they're in direct competition with some of the more established management consulting companies. So why they're looking to do this now, what is their key drivers, how they see the benefits working for that. So I'm hoping they will pull that all together, and that will be the next one. So we'll have a lot more to talk about then. Until then, remember, follow us on LinkedIn, our Twitter feed, our YouTube account, like all our content. Please feel free to add your comments, etc. And I look forward to next week's. Thank you very much.